Okay, that was a great introduction, and but some of you all are probably still wondering, what am I doing up here talking about hunting leases? And one of the things that we do for our landowning clients, we do a lot of different projects, but probably about 20 years ago, we saw that there was a need for some of our clients to have someone assist them with their hunting lease program. And so we currently, over the years, we manage about 85 leases, hunting leases for our clients. They're mostly relatively small leases and are concentrated in the East Alabama central area, but some throughout the state. And what we do this, just as we do most of our forest projects, we simply ask the landowner to sign a simple one-page proposal that lists the various things we're going to do for that project and the fee involved. And then the landowner signs it, and that's our cue to sign the agreement and go on with the project. And that's, for hunting lease management, that's sort of the last thing the landowner has to do. We go out and evaluate the property, and we also suggest the lease fees. We locate hunters. We sign the lease agreement as an agent for the landowner. We collect the money. It goes into an escrow account, and then we pay the landowner their share, and we pay ourselves the agreed-upon fee for our service. We send the lease and a copy of all the checks to make a very transparent transaction for the landowner. And we handle all the contacts and complaints from the landowners. Of course, hunting leases was not the way it used to go. Used to be people who would pretty much hunt on their own back 40. Probably 100 years ago, we had so many people living on rural lands. Leasing was not much of a thing. But then, probably after World War II, a lot of people moved into town, and less people were living on their properties, and it wasn't near. And so if you wanted to hunt, a lot of people had to go back home and get family or friends and just ask them if they could go hunting on their land. And it was just a very simple agreement. You knock on the door and ask somebody if you could hunt there, and if they said yes, you went out there and hunted, and maybe would bring them a bag of vegetables in the summer, or a ham hock, or a part of the deer, just to keep the goodwill up of that person. It was what I would call a handshake agreement. Sometimes there's small lease amounts that are paid. Sometimes the landowners get some help out there, some bush hogging, or some things that are done by the guys that are hunting out there. And really, legally, they're supposed to have written permission. In Alabama, you're not supposed to be hunting on somebody else's land without written permission. But it's still a very simple agreement. And like I said, I'm calling that handshake hunting. Why would you lease your land anyway? And of course, that's the main reason. There's money involved. And these days, there's quite a bit of money involved. And it is annual income. It is money that you can get every year, and if you're growing trees, you don't get money every year. You're lucky if you get money every 5 or 8 years, and maybe even longer than that, unless you own quite a bit of land. Another reason a good reason to hunt to allow hunting on your property is that there's people out there that are noticing things. We get calls from hunters all the time, and they'll say, you know, somebody has encroached on the line up here down this road, or we've had them call and say, you've got some trees that are dying, and it's a cue for us to go out there and notice, find that there's a beetle spot or something. A lot of the hunters will make improvements to your property. They will bush hog, plant food plots, open up trails. And I guess the last reason to lease your land is because in a lot of cases someone is hunting it anyway. Whether they're paying you or not, people have an uncanny way of knowing when there's people on your property when you're there and you're not. And they slip in and they hunt even if you have not allowed them to. And I know this because when we're cruising timber and walking over your lands, we find these hunting stands out there and say, who's hunting out there? Well, nobody's hunting on our property. Well, yes, they are, and that's sad but true. Wildlife are very attractive, and they don't know where the boundary lines are, and if you've got wildlife, you will have somebody that's out there hunting it at least part of the time, with a lease or not. Another reason to allow leases is just to reduce the deer herd, to save your gardens, and to save the deer from perhaps, or the other wildlife from being overstocked and having health problems. And the last reason, and this is something that I feel really strongly about, is that, you know, in this room, we're really privileged to own land, and maybe you inherited it, maybe you saved your money and you bought it, but there's a lot of people that are not in that position. And being outside and being able to be outside is good for your body and your mind and your soul, and when you lease your land, you're opening up that avenue of being outdoors to a lot of people. So handshake hunting, I talked about that, and we usually come in and we start our hunting lease program with people who are in some sort of a handshake agreement, and there's benefits to that. It's very simple. You oftentimes have the same people out there for a long period of time, because why not? You know, if they're not, if they've got a really good deal, they're going to stay. And they do notice problems and things going on out in your property. And you may say this is continuing the family tradition. Maybe your father engaged these people, or your grandfather even, and you want to just do what they've done. You want to respect the way they did it. The downside is you may have the same people out there year after year, and what I have seen in some cases is those people become domineering, and they begin to tell you, the landowner, what you can and cannot do out on your property. And you know, we've had them say they don't want the landowner out there because you might disturb their hunting. And all the time we hear some of these loose hunting arrangements. They'll say, you may not harvest timber during the hunting season because that's interrupting me, and I'm paying to, or some of them are paying and some of them are just have a handshake, but I'm going to be out in your, I'm going to take my right to hunt, and you may not have a timber sale in the hunting season. Well, timber prices are typically highest in the hunting season. And so that really restricts you, and if you don't want to do that, that's a problem. You also sometimes get a lot of complaints and there's misunderstandings when you don't have a formal lease agreement. And there's liability, and that's huge. If you don't require liability insurance, my husband Terry is a forester too, and he is for many years has taught hunter education, and he gets a list of all the different hunting accidents that occur in the state, and it's not something you want to risk happening on your property without some sort of liability insurance. There's also abuse of the land. We've taken over hunting leases where the monster truck mud bog scene was going on, and they just tore up roads and properties. We see hunting stands that are nailed into trees, and you're growing trees, and you don't want nails in your trees when you're trying to sell them. We also see a lot of messes. You know, people are out there camping, they have permanent camps, and leave a bunch of trash out there. And the pictures on the right is, we had one landowner that they were dismayed when they saw all this trash out on their property, and they hired us to come out. It took 2 pickup trucks and a trailer to get it doesn't look like much debris, but who's going to clean it up? You know, you are. I don't want to badmouth hunters too much, because there's a lot of good hunters and a lot of clean camps out there. But the way you get a good hunter and a clean camp is by having a written agreement and having it spelled out what they can and cannot do on your property. So you may say, I've got a situation where I know I'm not getting what I should be getting for a hunting lease. I'm not making enough money. I have hunters that are trying to tell me what to do, and I want something different. How do you get out of it? Well, first of all, I'd say be respectful to the hunter. If this person's been out in your property for a long time, or maybe even a short time, it's always going to be bad news to them to find out that something's going to change. And so we always try to be very respectful of the hunter. We always offer the existing hunter the first opportunity to take the new lease. And we, in fact, we have a pretty lengthy lease, and we fill it all out in that hunter's name and offer them the new price with the new stipulations for the lease, and they're the first one to have the opportunity to it. We also give them a little extra time to gather their money, because these people, a lot of them, you know, they're having to collect a few $100s from a brother and a cousin, and it's money that doesn't come really easy to everybody, and they need a little bit of extra time if you've gone up on the price. And if they can't accept those terms, then you move on to another hunter. And I would say probably more than 50% of our old hunters that we introduce, I mean, when they've been hunting a place on an informal agreement, probably about 50% of them will step up and take the new lease, maybe a little more. So the lease, always have a written agreement. The one we use is, you know, been reviewed by an attorney. There's probably every attorney would do a different sort of lease, and you can find templates online. But get it in writing. You know, you might have someone mow your lawn on a handshake, but you don't need to have this sort of agreement unless it's in writing. Always include a map or land, you know, make sure the hunters know what they are allowed to hunt. If you have an area they can't hunt, a buffer around your house, make sure they understand clearly what that is. Of course, you have to have in any contract the term of the lease, the money, the signatures. Make sure that you require that they have hunting insurance. If you don't have that in your lease, then who's to say they have to have it? And I would suggest that you protect your timber rights, and every one of our leases does this, and we every year we have timber sales on 2 or 3 different hunting leases, and we get to tell them that they're going to get interrupted, and they accept it. It's just part of life, and they know that they signed a lease that says that we can do that. And they accept it. They're not happy, but they accept it. There's also special provisions you might want to put in there. We had one hunter, and he just said, I only want gut piles in this place and this place. Don't put them, you know, he wanted to designate where you put your trash. And that's fine. I had another hunter who, he wanted to make sure we had no nails anywhere on the property. So when they put up no hunting signs or whatever, the hunter had them tied to the tree. It was kind of funny. But if you have things like that you want to introduce into your leases, then ask for it. And always put in there how to end the lease. That's really important, so that hunting lease does not become a lien on your property. Just last week I sold a property that we had a hunting lease on, and what we have in our leases is that with 30 days written notice, the hunter can cancel the lease and pays a prorated lease fee back. And that's what we did at closing. We had the hunter was on the closing statement, and he got paid his lease portion out of closing when that land sold. But you do not want to not have a way to end your lease. When will a lease not work? When you have no boundary lines, or you don't know where your boundary lines are because you have them, you just may not know where they are, or if you have no access. It's not fair to lease a property and you don't, it's not fair to the hunter or to your neighbors if you're trying to lease a property that you don't know where the boundary lines are or you don't have legal access to. You need to know what the legal restrictions are in your area. If you're close to a town, you might be restricted to just bow, an arrow, or just elevated stands, but you need to know that. When you have family and friends that are constantly interrupting hunting, or you have harassment from other hunters in the area, you have a lot of problems with theft, all these are concerns. I won't say that you can't lease land with those problems, but you have to be very careful who you lease to. We've had all of those problems on leases, and when the lease is canceled because the hunter has these problems, the next year when we try to get a new hunter, we're looking for somebody different. We don't want somebody that's bringing children out there to hunt if we have harassment going on. We've solved that problem sometimes by getting a group of policemen and people who are used to being harassed, I guess you might say, and they usually can hold the lease better than some people. And what will a hunting lease manager do, or if you are doing your own hunting lease management, you will end up locating new hunters when they're needed, contracting with them, not allowing hunting or land use, which is food plot development and stuff, until you have your certificate of insurance. You're going to have to correspond with the hunters, listen to their complaints. And one thing that we're careful about doing is that we notify the hunters whenever we're planning a timber sale on a property, and then again when we find out that the loggers are going to be moving on. They've got cameras out there in stands, and they need to be notified. And we also notify them when we're doing other activities, prescribed burning particularly, because there again, if they've got equipment out there, they need to be able to move it. And the hunting lease manager will handle the cancellation of the lease. And to be available to do extra tasks or inspections, such as cleanup when things happen that you don't anticipate. And that's pretty much it. I just hope that you all have good lease arrangements and happy hunting on your properties.